Huh. What? What? Most people knew Jin-Woo from seeing him in newspapers or on TV. Seoko recognized him from his daughter's social media post. Is this really Hunter Jin-Woo Sung? Seoko held up the front page of the newspaper he was holding to compare it to Jin-Woo's face. It felt a little strange for the hunter. But oddly enough, he wasn't annoyed. Maybe because his eyes looked a lot like Jinyo's. If he went bald as he got older, would he look just like his uncle? In Jin-Woo's mind, Seoko was known as Old Jinyo, ignoring his brother's angry stare. Seoko held out his hand with a cheerful grin. "Hey there, Hunter Sung," he said brightly. Jin-Woo blinked in surprise but found himself shaking Seoko's hand anyway. The handshake was firm and friendly, like greeting someone you've known forever. "I'm Seoko Gyu from Yule Pharmaceutical," he introduced with a smile. Jin-Woo's eyes widened in confusion. "You heard a lot about him. From who?" Jin-Woo didn't want to embarrass the man who had greeted him so warmly, so he smiled politely and said, "Oh, yes. It's great to meet you." Chairman Yu, who had been nervously watching their conversation, looked surprised when Seoko stood up straight and puffed out his chest like a proud rooster. "Did you see that? My daughter has an amazing eye for good guys, doesn't she?" Chairman Yu's daughter was super talented in music, which made Seoko feel a little insecure around Jin-Woo, who he clearly admired. But now Seoko could stand tall. After all, Jin-Woo was basically Korea's most sought-after guy. Turns out Seoko has a bigger social circle than anyone realized. Chairman Yu had been ready to give his brother a good scolding once Jin-Woo left, but his frustration faded away. Maybe things would go better if Jin-Woo and Seoko were acquainted. "Aw man, what am I even doing?" Seoko finally let go of Jin-Woo's hand. "Alright. You two probably need to talk, so I'll let you have some privacy." He seemed happy as he headed out of the chairman's office but paused next to Jin-Woo. "Hey, Hunter Sung," he said with a grin. "What is it?" Jin-Woo asked. "Feel free to come by my place anytime. My house is your house." Jin-Woo was taken aback. "Come over anytime. His house is mine." The man just laughed and hurried off, leaving Jin-Woo standing there in confusion. It was as if he had just said a bunch of weird stuff, and then disappeared into thin air. Jin-Woo couldn't help but burst out laughing at the whole strange encounter. Jin-Woo wasn't annoyed by Seko's big, booming voice or his super cheerful attitude. But there was something weird about the guy that caught Jin-Woo's attention. Chairman Yu leaned in curiously and asked, "So, how do you know my younger brother?" Jin-Woo didn't need to pretend anymore now that the other man was gone. Jin-Woo answered quietly, "I've never seen him before." Chairman Yu's scowl deepened. What is Seoko thinking? And he fumed to himself. My young hand should have known better. But since Jin-Woo was now here, the man known as Poker Face pushed aside his irritation and motioned for Jin-Woo to sit. "Take a seat," he said. Chairman Yu sat down across from Jin-Woo, his expression calm once again. Right on cue, Secretary Kim stepped into the room. "Want some tea?" someone asked. "I'm good," Jin-Woo replied when asked about Hunter Sung. He shook his head. Chairman Yu turned to the secretary. "We need to talk about something important, so could you step out for now?" Secretary Kim nodded and quickly left the room. Closing the door behind him, he stood guard outside, just as he had been told to do earlier. Even the president of Korea wouldn't have been let in. This was super serious business. The heavy silence between Jin-Woo and Yu felt almost as thick as it had in the elevator. But this time, the quiet hung in the air for a different reason. Chairman Yu needed a moment to gather his thoughts because what he was about to say wasn't easy. By the time Jin-Woo finally spoke up, he couldn't help but feel a bit restless. "Hunter Sung," he said. Chairman Yu pulled out a check from his pocket. It was from Myung-han Yu's account at the main bank used by Yujin Construction. But this wasn't just any regular check. It was blank. "Here," Chairman Yu said, sliding it across to Jin-Woo. Jin-Woo glanced at it for a moment before looking up again. Chairman Yu struggled to find the right words. Chairman Yu wiped the sweat from his palms, his heart pounding in his chest. This was way scarier than any big presentation or meeting he'd ever had. Even though he was a powerful man who ran a huge company, right now he felt nervous and unsure. "I hope you'll accept this as a small thank you," he said quietly. His eyes were serious, showing how much this meant to him. Jin-Woo could tell why they were meeting here. It was a place where no one would overhear them. Whatever they were discussing was top secret. Jin-Woo was quick to piece things together. This wasn't about joining forces or some business deal. Myung-han had picked this spot because he could control everything that happened here. Jin-Woo didn't need to hear more to understand how serious this was. What would you like to buy from me, Mr. Yu? Chairman, you put everything out in the open. The truth is, I have the same illness your mother had. Jin-Woo was stunned. Does Jin-Woo know? Myung-han shook his head. Only my doctor, my wife, my secretary, and I know. And now you're the fourth person to find out. Jin-Woo nodded, finally understanding why Chairman Yu had reached out to him in secret, instead of going through Jin-Woo. Chairman Yu kept his sickness a secret from his family. Tens of thousands of workers counted on him. So even one little cough could cause big issues. The company's stock went up or down, based on how well he was doing. If people found out that Chairman Yu wasn't going to be around much longer, it would create serious trouble for Yujin Construction, and all the businesses connected to it. So, Myung-han kept his sickness a secret. Even from his family, he dealt with it by handling everything on his own. Yet, he chose to share it with me. It was probably a careful decision. Myung-han wasn't just any businessman. He was super successful, and never gave up. Sure. Here's a fun and engaging version of the text for a 7th grade reading level. There was no way a big boss like Chairman Myung-han would take a risk without getting something in return. Jin-Woo already had a pretty good idea what the chairman wanted to ask. And sure enough, Myung-han didn't hold back. I've searched everywhere for a cure, but only one person has ever been freed from this illness, he said. Jin-Woo wasn't surprised. After all, the only person ever cured of the eternal sleep disease was his mom, Hunter Sung. People had always been amazed by Jin-Woo's mysterious powers abilities no one else had ever seen. Chairman Myung-han had clearly done his homework and came to a smart conclusion. Maybe Jin-Woo had used one of those powers to save his mother. But Jin-Woo didn't say if the chairman was right or wrong, he just listened. He stared at him silently. Chairman Yu gulped hard. He knew he couldn't make any mistakes now. Everything up to this point had been like practice. But now it was game time. This was the moment of truth. Myung-han took a short breath, and spoke firmly. I promise everything I'm telling you is true, he said. He slid the check a bit closer. This isn't all I can offer you. The blank check was just part of the deal. Because Myung-han could give Jin-Woo much more than money. If you help me, he added, I'll owe you forever. The man who was like a tiger in the financial world, was now bowing his head and begging for Jin-Woo's help. If you'd seen Chairman Yu in this moment, you probably would been totally stunned. He was acting super nervous. His heart raced, he was breathing hard, and even though he tried to look calm on the outside, Jin-Woo could tell how desperate he really was inside. Jin-Woo stayed cool as he watched him closely, thinking to himself, I don't think he's lying. All those signs added up to one clear message for Jin-Woo. Chairman Yu wasn't lying. But just because you really want something doesn't mean it'll happen. Jin-Woo thought about it for a moment before answering. I'm sorry, he said. Those two words hit Myung-han hard. I can't help you with this. Myung-han's face fell. He had been so hopeful coming into this conversation. And now he couldn't believe Jin-Woo was turning him down. How did your mom get cured, Sung? Jin-Woo's face turned stone-cold serious. Myung-han felt a chill run down his spine. It was a sharp reminder of who he was up against. Jin-Woo kept going. If I knew how to cure the sleeping sickness and wanted to make money off it, don't you think I'd have done it by now? A bunch of ideas raced through Chairman Yu's head as he tried to piece things together. Was Jin-Woo worried about being targeted by someone powerful? Definitely not. Myung-han quickly shot down that idea. Jin-Woo was an active S-rank hunter, and a super strong one at that. The thought of someone threatening him was just plain silly. Then, did Jin-Woo want something other than money? Chairman Yu didn't think so either. Hunter Sung could easily become famous if he wanted to. But he just doesn't care about that sort of thing. Chairman Yu suddenly realized his mistake way too late. The secret to negotiating is figuring out what the other person really wants. You give them what they want, and in return you get what you want. But Chairman Yu had no clue what Jin-Woo wanted. So this negotiation was doomed from the start. There were only two possibilities here. Either Jin-Woo honestly didn't know the cure, or he just didn't care about anything. Chairman Yu could offer. Either way, things looked hopeless for Myung-han. Chairman Yu sighed and gave up trying to keep Jin-Woo around any longer. Well then, he said. Jin-Woo stood up to leave, and Myung-han awkwardly followed suit. He called out for his secretary, who rushed into the room. As soon as Kim stepped inside, He could feel the tension between Jin-Woo and Chairman Yu. His face looked serious because this meeting was their last chance. "Sir, you called?" he asked. My young Han nodded softly. "Hunter Sung is leaving, so please walk him home." "Oh no, thank you," Jin-Woo said politely. Declining the offer, he bowed quickly to Chairman Yu and his secretary before stepping into the elevator alone. The doors closed with a soft whoosh, and the elevator zoomed down from the top floor to the bottom in seconds. Jin-Woo didn't notice until now, but the elevator felt huge and empty with just him inside. He sighed heavily, feeling uneasy about turning down Chairman Yu, who was like a father to his friend. Part of Jin-Woo wanted to help, but he didn't really know Chairman Yu at all. Jin-Woo wasn't sure if Chairman Yu was genuinely sick or hiding something else. Jin-Woo had just enough of the powerful elixir of life to cure his mom, but he had to use it carefully since there wasn't much left. The chairman's offer was tempting but not enough to convince him.
Forwarding.
Unlike before, when my young Han was with him, no one gave him a second glance this time. A few people shot him weird looks, probably wondering why he'd taken the executive elevator, but Jin-Woo just kept moving toward the exit. As he approached, the security guard pushed the door open for him, but Jin-Woo froze mid-step. Across the lobby, a voice caught his attention. "Breaking news from Japan." His head snapped toward the sound. A huge TV in the lobby caught Jin-Woo's eye. When he first arrived it was turned off, but now it glowed with a live update from Japan. Something big had happened, an underground catastrophe. Maybe. He walked over to see what all the fuss was about. The helicopter footage showed a city in ruins, and it looked terrifying. Giants were smashing buildings and grabbing people to swallow them whole. The remaining soldiers tried everything they could to fight back, but nothing worked. Without hunters and their special powers, there was no way to stop these magic beasts. The number of deaths was terrifying. Over 1 million people lost their lives. It was a disaster beyond words. Jin-Woo just stood there, frozen in shock. This was his first glimpse of what was happening in Japan. After leaving Jinchul to handle things at the Double Dungeon, he had gone straight home and crashed. What he saw now blew his mind. It was way worse than he'd imagined. It brought back memories of the nightmare that happened on Jeju Island 4 years ago. The situation in Japan was a total disaster. The only positive thing about that incident was that it happened on an island, so it didn't spread to the rest of Korea. But Japan wasn't so lucky, facing total destruction. Thump thump thump. Thump, Jin-Woo's heart raced, and he felt annoyed. The thought of such weaklings attacking humans really disgusted Jin-Woo. Then suddenly he was shocked. Wait, did he just call them weaklings? He had never fought these giants before and couldn't even detect their magic from TV, so why did he naturally think they were weaker than him? Was Jin-Woo being too confident? He twisted his head back and forth, then shook it. His mind was a mess with everything happening at once. Jin-Woo turned, pushed through the crowd of worried employees gathered around the TV watching the broadcast, and hurried out of the building. Day 2 of the dungeon chaos had arrived, and all eyes around the globe were glued to Japan. What was their plan? Was there any hope left for Japan? Would the United States step in? Could these giants cross the ocean and invade other countries once they were done there? As Japan kept falling apart, worry grew. Even people who didn't like Japan felt sorry for them, even if it wasn't very sincere. But Japan didn't need pity, they needed real help, and the strength to fight those magic beasts. Meanwhile, as the United States held off on making an official statement, shocking news came out. 1/10 of Japan had already been destroyed. On TV, videos showed evacuees swarming the highways. People had left their homes to escape to the far edges of the country. But eventually they reached the end of the road, literally and in every other way. As the world watched the horror unfold, more and more questions popped up. What is Korea even doing? People asked. Why isn't Korea stepping in to help Japan? Doesn't Korea know what compassion means? Just a few weeks before, there had been the Jeju Island raid, adding another layer of confusion to the situation. Japan had lost half of its top S-rank hunters, and people were furious. Why wasn't Korea stepping up to help, after all Japan had done for them? As more lives were lost every hour, the sadness and anger grew. More and more people began siding with Japan, while criticism against Korea heated up. Korea, what's going on? Don't they care about loyalty? Some demanded. Did they forget how Japan helped during the Jeju Island crisis? Others wondered if Korea had just turned its back on its ally. The situation was causing a huge stir worldwide, and everyone was talking about it. The tension kept rising as people started to wonder why Japan was asking almost every country except Korea for help. Then, on the third day, President Go decided it was time to step forward. He walked into a crowded room filled with reporters and cameras, and in a calm voice, he began to speak. First off, I want to send my sympathy to everyone in Japan during these tough times. Now, let me share where the Hunters Association of Korea stands. Before Korea held its press conference, something big happened. Hunter Command Center made an important announcement. In their press room, the United States spoke publicly about the dungeon break for the very first time. They revealed that hunters were already gathering. So, is the US finally stepping up to help Japan? The room was electric as a sea of reporters buzzed with excitement. They cheered like they were the ones being saved, relieved that so many lives might be spared. But then the spokesperson stepped forward and dropped a bombshell. This isn't about Japan. The crowd fell silent, confusion written on every face as reporters exchanged puzzled glances and whispered to each other. No one knew what was happening, so everyone looked at each other for clues. The spokesperson pointed to a big screen behind them. Then people started reacting. Some shouted, "Whoa," others said, "No way." Reporters' mouths dropped open in shock as they watched the video. You could hear a pin drop in that room. It was so quiet except for some shocked murmurs. The video showed something crazy, a huge gate found in Maryland that day. It wasn't as big as the one in Japan, but it was still massive. The spokesperson explained that even though bigger gates don't always mean better ranked dungeons, a gigantic gate usually hints at something major. According to our investigative team's evaluation, this gate is just as impressive as the one in Japan. It's an S rank. Our top hunters are ready to give it their all and conquer this dungeon. Reporters were shocked, covering their faces or shaking their heads. It's unheard of for two S-rank gates to show up at the same time. The United States wasn't worried at all. They had gathered some of the strongest hunters from around the globe to handle things. But for Japan, this was bad news. The US couldn't send any help their way. When the Japanese people heard that the support they were counting on wasn't coming, they felt crushed and worried. The world was in chaos. Gigantic magic beasts were tearing through everything in their path as they marched south. People who had escaped to the north were running out of places to hide, nowhere left to go. Meanwhile, Korea held a big press conference. President Go stepped up to the microphone and declared, "Korea will not get involved in what's happening in Japan." The day before this announcement, only two people were in the huge office of the Ajin Guild, Jin-Woo and Jin-Yo. The room was empty except for them, but Jin-Yo's eyes sparkled with excitement as they waited. "Boss, there's a B-rank gate. Should we grab it? Is that gate on the Hunters Guild's territory?" Oh yeah, it is. Nah, I'll pass." "Got it." The Hunters Guild was already dealing with a lot after losing many of their top members. If Jin-Ho's team took the gate now, it might seem like they were taking advantage of the guild's tough situation. Jin-Ho turned to Jin-Woo. "Hey boss, what's got you so focused?" Jin-Woo finally looked away from the screen and leaned back in his chair with a thoughtful expression.
Jin-Ho, he said casually.
"Yes, boss?" Jin-Ho asked, curious about what was on Jin-Woo's mind. Jin-Woo hesitated before speaking up. "I've been thinking. Should I go to Japan?" Jin-Ho's eyebrows shot up in surprise.
"Excuse me, boss, are you serious?"
He'd seen Jin-Woo in action way too many times to count. S-rank gates were entirely different. They couldn't be measured, so you never knew what would happen next. Just like how S-rank hunters had big differences in strength, the creatures coming out of an S-rank gate could be super dangerous, or maybe not. That's why Jin-Ho took his boss's warning seriously. He glanced over at Jin-Woo's screen and saw it was filled with breaking news about the dungeon break. The updates were coming in non-stop. Jin-Woo had always felt like his amazing abilities were a double-edged sword. Sure, they made him special, but they also brought a ton of pressure. One day as he was sitting with Jin-Yo, his friend said casually, "Hang on, boss." Jin-Woo looked up, curious. Jin-Yo stood up and walked over to a cabinet. He pulled out an old scrapbook and opened it, revealing page after page filled with newspaper articles and printouts. Jin-Woo's eyes widened as he realized they were all about him. "What is this?" he asked, both surprised and a little concerned. Jin-Yo didn't answer right away, but the serious look on his face made Jin-Woo realize something important was up. Jin-Woo's eyes widened as he flipped through the stack of articles Jin-Yo handed him. Each one told an amazing story about someone saving the day, like stopping a massive traffic jam or battling strange stone statues. But what really caught Jin-Woo off guard was that Ship was the hero in all these stories. Jin-Yo, you've been collecting these? Jin-Woo asked, shocked. His friend nodded, his cheeks turning pink. Yeah, boss. I thought you'd want to see them. Jin-Woo tilted his head. But why show me now? Jin-Yo's voice dropped to a whisper. You know what all these have in common, right? Jin-Woo hesitated for a moment before shrugging. Jin-Yo didn't need to say another word. They both knew the answer. I'm not in any of them, boss. Thanks to his super sharp hearing, Jin-Woo caught what Jin-Yo said. Huh? Jin-Yo looked up, locking eyes with Jin-Woo. Boss, if you go to Japan, please take me with you.
Jin-Woo was stunned.
He'd expected Jin-Yo to either try to talk him out of it or cheer him on, but asking to come along, that was the last thing he saw coming. Jin-Yo said with a completely straight face, this is kinda embarrassing to admit, but you're my pride, boss. You're like the only thing I can brag about. Jin-Woo was about to say something, but clamped his mouth shut, mid-sentence. From the outside, Jin-Yo seemed like he had it all. But for him, money and stuff didn't feel like things to be proud of. They actually felt like a burden. Starting the Achin Guild and meeting Jin-Woo were things Jin-Yo had done on his own. Jin-Woo understood why Jin-Yo felt so strongly about this. That's why I'd like to come with you, boss. Jin-Woo said, please take me along. Our Jin-Yo looked at him seriously. You know where we're headed, right? Aside, even though Jin-Yo was a bit naive and immature, he couldn't ignore what was happening in Japan. The world was a nightmare, with massive giants deciding the fate of the country. Jin-Yo nodded firmly, his voice filled with worry. Just promise me, you won't get hurt, he said. If something does happen to you, I can't even think about it. His big shining eyes were full of trust, a trust so strong that it tugged at Jin-Woo's heart. Jin-Woo playfully ruffled Jin-Hyo's hair. Jin-Hyo looked confused but didn't push him away. Huh, boss? He asked. I was just kidding, Jin-Woo said with a grin. Why would I go to Japan right now? He stood up and stretched. Let's call it a day. You did great today. Well, wait, are you leaving already, boss? Jin-Hyo asked, bowing deeply as Jin-Woo waved. Goodbye. See you tomorrow, boss. Jin-Woo called out. Then Kerchak let out a loud roar. As soon as Jin-Woo stepped into his apartment, he was greeted by the delicious smell of his mom's cooking. His stomach growled in response, and his mouth started watering. He paused for a second to take it all in. It smelled so good. The best part about having his mom home was that she'd be there to greet him when he walked in the door. The house wasn't as gloomy as before, which was a nice change. Is that you, son? Kyunji called out from the kitchen. Yes, Mom. Jin-Woo replied, quickly slipping off his shoes. He hurried to where her voice came from, greeting her with a cheerful smile. I'm home. You haven't eaten dinner yet, have you? She asked. No, I haven't. What about Gina? Jin-Woo inquired. She says she doesn't feel like eating. His mom replied. Jin-Woo stopped mid-step as he was pulling out a chair. Again. She couldn't sleep at all last night. So she just passed out now. Jin-Woo quietly opened the door to Gina's room. His sister was tossing and turning in her sleep, whimpering softly. Man. Despite her usual cheerful personality, it was clear she was still struggling with what had happened. Jin-Woo clenched his fists. Every time he saw his sister like this, it made him furious. He hated those magic beasts more than ever.